So 3 vampires walk into a bar, right? First one looks at the bartender and says, "Hey, I'll have a pint of blood." Second vampire looks at the bartender and says, "Hey, I'll have a pint of blood too." Third vampire looks at the bartender. He says, "Hey, I'm just going to have a pint of plasma." Bartender looks at all 3 of them and says, "All right, so that's going to be 2 bloods and a blood light." Hey Internet, Mike Byrne here from MMOBomb.com, bringing you another first look video. This time it is for V-Rising, the survival vampire game that just released in early access, developed and published by Stunlock Studios of Battlerite fame. We're going to spend about 15 minutes or so checking out the initial impressions of the game, giving you our opinions, and telling you a little bit about what you can expect if you plan to play V-Rising. Now, the game's in early access right now on Steam in bundles ranging from $19.99 USD for the base game all the way to $53.97 for V-Rising and the DLC Founders Pack stuff bundled all together, with some of those DLC options able to be purchased separately if you don't want to spring for the entire bundle. Now, once you get all installed and ready to go, what is the core of V-Rising? Well, it's basically a multiplayer survival game where you are a vampire that has been asleep for centuries after a war that almost eradicated all the vampires, and now you are back to lay your claim to a piece of land, build your castle, gain in power, and explore the world. Now, I don't want you to think MMO or MMORPG. V-Rising is not that. Yes, it does have some features and aesthetics that you would see in MMO games, things like global chat, the ability to kind of raid PvE bosses that are on the map together, and some other features like that. But this is actually a closed instance server-based game. You're going to choose from one of 4 game modes when you get started. You can choose PvE, where you are just going to explore the countryside, get your castle, build and craft your way to success, and yes, you could partner up with up to 3 vampires for a group of 4 to kind of work together, but you won't have any competition with other players as far as killing them or trying to take over their castles. You do have the player versus player server, where it's very similar to a PvE environment, same map and same PvE type content in bosses around the world, but you can lay siege or raid other castles in specific time frames that the server gives you, as well as take on other vampires you may see walking around in the wild. There's also a full loot PvP variant of that type of server, so if you kill a vampire, everything gets dropped and you can grab it. And there's a smaller duo PvP, where instead of having maybe groups or clans of 4 vampires, you can join a group of 2. And again, those same rules of raiding castles are pretty consistent across all 3 PvP options. There's also the option to either join or host your own private server, and in those you can actually modify the rules. Things like castle decay, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the first look, can be toggled on and off to your preferences. If you join a server or host one, then you literally get to make all the decisions on the hosting side of things. Now, one thing I do want to mention really early here, because I've been following V-Rising for a while, I've been in multiple tests, I'm a huge vampire nut, and I'm okay with, like, survival games. They're not generally my cup of tea, but I was excited for V-Rising. There was a feature that they talked about very early in development, and that was being able to kind of solo offline play via a private server with no internet connection. That is not added yet. It's a little weird that they kind of pump that or advertise that very early, but then it is not part of this early access. Now, the team has said via their Discord that they are prioritizing making that available, so that may actually be available in the next couple of days. So depending on when you're watching this first look, you may actually be able to do that already. But as of the recording today, you cannot play offline solo on a private server and have no connection to the internet. You can queue up in the PvE or PvP servers solo if you would like, but you do have to maintain an always online connection, even if you were doing so on a private server or a server with just you and you're all by your lonesome, nobody else. So stay tuned. We should see more about that in the next couple of days. All right, so you've booted up V Rising. What are we going to do? Well, first we're going to create our vampire, and honestly, there's not a lot going on in character customization here. You may have gotten a few cosmetics via one of the DLCs if you bought one of the Founders Pack bundles. You may get a skin for your wolf transformation. Those things will be available here in the character creation screen as well if you have gotten those, if you had purchased those. But it's really just pick from, a dozen preset faces, pick from a dozen or so, a couple dozen hairstyles, pick a couple colors. Do you want the male or female body types for your vampire, and maybe a couple of cosmetics, glasses here and there. Most of these cosmetics, or the way you look, can actually be changed in-game as you learn various crafting recipes. You can also craft a mirror in your castle that will let you access this character creation screen at any time for your existing vampire, so that you can adjust some of these cosmetics on the fly if you get more through DLC patterns or maybe even future DLC. But don't expect much out of character creation right now. Upon your first boot up, I would highly recommend playing on a PvE server, just to get your bearings on what you want to take as your strategy if you go into a PvP server. Now, I've spent a lot of time in the early access period, and again, I've been in multiple tests prior to this, so I highly recommend this. Jump into PvE, and you're going to start receiving quests. And they will point you in the basic direction of how you want to achieve success in V Rising. Once you hit the map, you want to find a place to start your castle by planting a castle heart, crafting a castle heart. Now, you can literally place your castle anywhere, provided that the terrain doesn't block the item size that you're trying to build. But if you want to build right next to a castle that's already there, there's nothing really stopping you from doing so. I actually, on my PvE server this afternoon, saw two people basically having PvP because one built a castle in such a way that it blocked all the entrances to the other player's castle. So they could not get to their own castle without this other player opening the doors on their own castle to let them walk through. But in your travels, you're going to do basic survival stuff, and I've seen this game compared a lot to Valheim, and yeah, it certainly does share some similarities, mainly in my estimation, kind of like the killing of PvE bosses to advance your skill trees. That's very similar to Valheim. But, if any survival game where you're constantly gathering and crafting, hell, if you want to go back and just compare it to Minecraft, right? You want to build a castle, you're going to have to farm up a shit ton of rocks, right? That's the way this game works. That's the way Rust is another one that comes to mind in some ways. We've got an isometric viewpoint here with WASD movement. So for those of you that are looking for click to move, you might have to get used to a couple of things here. And for those of you looking for battle right combat, because this comes from Stunlock Studios, yeah, I'd temper your expectations on that a little bit. There are cooldowns in the combat, and we'll get to a bunch of those options as we get further in the first look here. All right, so really in V Rising, it's all about blood. And that kind of makes sense, right? You're a vampire. Blood is what makes your world go round. As you are starting to build your castle, which the PvE server does give you quests to kind of guide you along that path, you are going to not only need to farm up materials, lumber, wood, stone, things like that, but you are also going to need to farm up blood. Your castle needs it to function. You have to put blood into the heart of your castle to actually operate your sawmill and other crafting and refining stations. So you're constantly going to be getting blood for that. But your vampire, being a vampire, is also vitally, blood is vitally important to them. And that's what actually keeps you healing while you're out of combat. If you ever are dying of thirst, you have no blood, then you actually lose HP and can die. other vampire tropes do, of course, enter the game as well. The sun is a bear. The sun will kill you very quickly, so stick to the shadows where possible. Other things like carrying silver can do damage. There's going to be garlic later in the game. You're not going to see that one right away, but that is one that can do damage, and you can craft items to mitigate both sun and garlic and silver damage. So all of those kind of vampire tropes go in here. One of the very cool things I thought was neat with the blood, though, as you are drinking blood from weakened characters or wildlife that you have beaten up in combat, they have a particular attribute. Beating up on a bear might show you that the bear has 8% beast blood, or creature blood in this case. And so you can kill them, or you can drink from them once they are weakened. And if you drink from them, your vampire will take on that 8% creature. Various percentage thresholds unlock additional perks for each bloodline, but drinking from some other bloodline will automatically change you. So for instance, if you drink from a bear and are creature 10%, you might get a buff to your movement speed. However, if you then subsequently go after a human NPC that is labeled as brute 10%, and you drink from them, you will lose the creature attribute. You will gain the brute attribute at whatever percentage the target you drank was from, and you will gain certain perks for that too. So for those of you that like to have more sneaky gameplay, find an NPC that's very high in rogue and go ahead and drink from them. For those that want an extra item level in their gear or some extra damage, maybe go drink from a brute. It all depends on what you're going to be doing, on maybe who you're going to drink from. So it's not just a bloodbath, so to speak. You might want to be a little selective in who you are drinking from at any given point in time. The real meat and potatoes of V Rising, though, comes down to its gathering and crafting. And this is the part that you're either going to like the game or you aren't, specifically for this. If you looked at V Rising and thought, hey, I'd really like to go explore the world as a vampire, take on PvE kind of MMO-ish bosses, and I mean that in the way of like they have telegraphs and different abilities, you can do that. You can even do it solo. Some of the later stuff will get a little more challenging, and you'll have to have the appropriate gear level and mechanics and skill and aptitude to take them on solo. And things do scale if there are other players in the area, so it's not impossible. But to get those appropriate skill level or those appropriate item levels with your gear, you are going to have to do the building and gathering and crafting aspect of the game. And you're going to have to do it to a very, very heavy degree unless you have a few friends as part of your clan that like doing that, and then they can just craft and shower you with the gear, and you can go do the PvE stuff. So here's my take on it, though. If you are the type that ever sat in Minecraft for hours and hours building your Fortress of Solitude, you'll like most of V Rising. If you are the type of person that likes to jump into survival games and just continue to build and see what you can do and how far can you take it, you're probably going to like V Rising too. If you are expecting an action adventure through an open world, go explore it, this might not be for you unless you are okay with the insane amounts of gathering and crafting. And that's not to say that it's like staggering amounts, but there is a grind. It is that type of game when it comes to gathering and crafting. And the quests, I actually like this aspect. The quests only hold your hands for so long on this stuff. Initially, it'll be, go get lumber, come back, do this. That's easy enough. But then you'll start to get quests that tell you to build something and interact with it, but they don't give you the interim steps, which might involve actually hunting down a V-blood target to learn specific recipes, to come back and build a different station that you don't have right now, to then create item A, which will, after you have enough, allow you to create the item for the quest. They don't give you those interim steps. So I actually kind of enjoyed how it starts to take the training wheels off as you go. But we mentioned the V-Blood targets in the game. These are your kind of named NPCs that you're going to need to kill for a number of different reasons. One, in the vein of Valheim, in the vein of Valheim, the V-Blood targets are targets you can specifically hunt for via a smelling blood mechanic, one at a time, and take out so that you either gain recipes, very static recipes, target A will give you recipe A type deal, or abilities. Your vampire has a number of different ability trees when it comes to magic and things like that, including an ultimate ability that you are going to unlock through killing these targets. The targets, however, get progressively more difficult. You'll have to have higher levels of gear to go after those targets, and that's where you go back to your crafting and gathering loop to raise your gear and go out after these targets. These targets, like I said, are the ones that kind of exude MMO-type fighting. Some of them, when you get a little further in the game, do actually feel pretty raidish. But when you get to combat, you have 4 primary weapons to start with, and then you'll open up 3 more additional weapon types right around the time you get to crafting with iron. It is very start with brick, or start with stone, go to copper, and then go to iron, and on up like that. Once you get to iron, you'll open up 3 more additional weapon types for a total of 7 right now, but I would expect that to change as more content is added later. It is very left and mouse click to do different abilities, to swing a sword, and of course, in the crafting gathering aspect of things, the right tool for the right job yields better rewards. Using a mace to crush stone is going to be better than hitting stone with a sword. Using an axe on trees is going to work better than using your sword on trees. Of course, you can use all of them, doesn't matter, but if you're looking to min-max how much of each resource you'll get, that's a great way to do it. Now, the vampire abilities that you do open up can get very neat and do kind of lend themselves to a great deal of customization because you can only equip a few abilities at a time. So if you want to skew heavy for ranged magic, you can. If you want to skew more towards physical combat, you can. There's even abilities later in the game that do allow you to enthrall humans to your service, whether that be people that will go out and do hunting and gathering for you, or people that will basically serve as human blood vessels in a cage, you know, draining them of their blood. So it does just keep building on the whole vampire aesthetic. I have to appreciate a great degree of vampires weren't just our, hey, this is our hook. Everything does kind of revolve around this and build on this idea of you are a vampire. On top of that, the crafting gets very, very in-depth for those of you that really, really just like building the best house in a game. Whether, you know, WildStar's housing had a ton of options, this has a ton of options and will only get more as well. Want to build your castle out of stone? Go ahead, but then you've got stone patterns that you can use for the walls. You've got rugs that you can put on the carpets, or on the floors. You've got different torches, different lighting, mirrors, windows, doors, parapets, steps. Like, you can customize the hell out of the way your castle looks. Want to make a big square where you have all your crafting stations in one place and you just do what you want to do? Fine. Want to build individual crafting rooms with specific floors on them so that you can get the max buff out of the refining station? You can absolutely do that too, provided you have found, gathered, or learned the recipes to make those items. Creating a tailoring station in an enclosed room with a tailoring floor in that entire room is not only going to reduce the time to craft an item by 25% because it's in an enclosed room, but then also the cost by 25% because the floor in that entire room is the tailoring floor. So if you can compartmentalize all of your stuff into various rooms of your castle, go ahead. Now, the castle itself is subject to decay, and this is even on PvE servers as well. So, you're going to have to put blood essence into the heart of your castle to keep it going and run all the machinery. And the timer will tell you as you upgrade your castle how long the amount of blood essence you've put in there will allow your castle to stay functioning. This is an important thing to remember if you're going to log out. Many people in early access who had never played the game in beta or anything like that logged out and were surprised to come back in and see that their castle was gone and they were on a PvE server. They didn't understand. If you don't have enough blood to power your castle until the next time you get on, your castle will turn into a state of decay. When it's decaying, it is possible for other players, even on a PvE server, to destroy that castle and free up the land that is there by destroying the heart of your castle. Now, as long as you've got blood pumping through your castle on a PvE server, you are fine. Nothing else can happen. On PvP servers, though, in addition to this decay mechanic, again, assuming the default server rules, there are times when other castles are eligible to flat out be raided, and they can be taken over or destroyed if the invaders happen to have the right set of keys to do so. So you do have to make sure you are managing your resources accordingly, or you're going to be starting over each time you come back to the server. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the world itself. Initially, it's going to feel very, very big because you are going to be walking everywhere and exploring caves and exploring mines, and there's cave paths to go from one part of the map to another. There are some fast travel points. However, you cannot use those fast travel points if you are carrying resources. So basically, you want to dump everything into chests at your castle if you're planning to warp out, kill a boss, and then warp back without having to walk all the way. That's probably the best way to do it. Even on PvE servers, you cannot teleport while you're carrying resources. So the teleport system leaves a little bit to be desired, in my opinion. I understand why it would make you take the walk if you were full loot PvP servers. You got to make it back to your castle. I'm not quite sure I agree with not being able to teleport with resources on a PvE server. But you're going to be walking everywhere. You'll get wolf form early, so that'll give you a little bit of a speed increase. If you find a horse, you can tame it and then take care of it, giving it water to get around even faster. So initially, the world does seem quite big. But on a PvE server, after probably, I don't know, let's say average play sessions for a week, maybe 2 if you didn't play every day, you're going to have the map explored. And the PvE bosses, they're in the same places. They have a little area that they can walk around, so it's not the exact spot, but they are in the same general area. So I don't know how long the game will actually hold up for a PvE player, unless it's somebody that is just super about customizing a very cool-looking castle. That's probably the player that could infinitely stay on the PvE servers and have a lot of fun. I think at some point, most players, you're going to want to either move to the PvP servers, where the game takes on an entirely different tone, or maybe it's not the game for you if you're looking to get, hundreds and thousands of hours out of it. $20, I think you're still going to enjoy it for $20 and not feel bad about the purchase if you just want to do PvE for a couple of weeks and then let it go. But the people that jump into PvP from PvE are probably going to be the ones at hundreds and thousands of hours in V Rising. All in all, I really think they got something here. I'm a little concerned that the PvE portion without content updates is going to run its course. Are you really going to want to run another vampire to max crafting and gathering and max weapons and max gear over and over? Probably not. I mean, unless you just keep taking different friends in there and are just, kind of goofing off with your friends. For those of you that like the gameplay and are cool with the PvP aspect, or create your own server with a group of friends, maybe planning war against each other, there's an awful lot of fun to be had here. Does V-Rising do anything brand spanking new in my book? No, but it does a lot of things that you're familiar with really right. And in early access, besides some performance hiccups for some systems that were having this like degradation of play quality over a long period of playtime, and usually a restart fixed that, and they are working on that. I personally haven't had any performance issues with the game. I do think it's in a great shape compared to a lot of early access titles we've talked about on this channel. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up for now. It's doing exactly what I wanted it to do while I was following it, while I was doing betas and alphas. But we'll have to see if it's got legs and if it's going to last into that dark night. Will it be undying? I don't know. We'll have to see. Let me know what your early impressions of V-Rising are in the comments below, and if you like this type of content, obviously make sure you subscribe, click like, throw a comment down there, and tell your friends. Come on over to MMOBomb.com for all the great giveaways and more, and until next time, this is Magic Man, aka Mike Byrne, saying stay safe, and I'll see you on the servers.